give the level playing field to all of the companies that would hire more people and create jobs in America, and they will do it if there is a level and fair and stable regulatory and tax environment in America. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
The Senator from Colorado.
Mr. President, before I begin my remarks, I know that hour is drawing near when we'll have a vote and the time limits are approaching as well. I'd ask unanimous consent that the full text of my remarks be included in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today, as many senators have, to talk about the energy-related votes that we faced this week in the Senate. In my home state of Colorado and in the presiding officer's home state of Pennsylvania and all over our country, Americans are feeling the sting of rising gas prices. And pain at the pump puts a real crimp in the budgets of hardworking families and businesses everywhere. And I hear this every time I'm back in my home state, listening and visiting with the folks there, and they think it's unfair, and I have to say I agree. Runaway gas prices are not acceptable, and it's our job, I think, here to work across the partisan divide to bring a stop to it. But I have to tell you, instead of pursuing some common sense goals that would move our economy forward and that would involve a comprehensive energy proposal, we're here punching away at each other on issues largely unrelated to our energy independence and the prices that Americans pay at the pump. Now, I'm going to support the vote today. We ought to reduce tax breaks for the 5 largest oil companies. But I really have to say I wish this had been part of a larger discussion on a comprehensive energy strategy that allow us to lead the global economic race. And that said, I'm going to vote to repeal what I think are needless tax breaks for big oil. Traditional energy production has received billions of subsidies over the last 70 years. 70 years. And the top 5 oil companies in particular make billions in profits that far exceed the need for more government support. And I happen to agree with thousands of Coloradans who've been in touch with me to say these companies, which are among the biggest in the world, don't need and shouldn't receive taxpayer money, especially as we look for ways to consolidate our tax code and reduce the deficit. Now, it's important to me that the bill's limited to the top 5 companies, and it doesn't include small, independent producers that provide a lot of jobs in Colorado. And I should note that there's some tax credits, like the production tax credit for wind, the investment tax credit for solar, and the intangible drilling cost tax credit for small oil and gas producers that are important to jobs in Colorado and across our country. Now, I think we would agree the ideal energy market would be free from any tax credits. But I also want to make sure that we invest in our domestic energy industries that still need help getting off the ground. And as with most policy matters, this is a delicate balance. So let me wind down my remarks with this request to my colleagues, that we would take responsibility for our economic future and get serious about energy independence. That means that we'd have to shed, each and every one of us, some of our doctrinaire positions. And what's too often, I think, here on the floor, a my way or the highway approach. There are ways to responsibly drill for oil while also increasing our renewable electricity production. There are ways to safely expand nuclear power while also boosting energy efficiency. And there are ways to harness natural gas as a bridge fuel while also spurring a generation of electric cars. These aren't either-or propositions, Mr. President. And I think we especially have to seize the clean energy opportunity that's in front of us so that 2, 4, 10 years from now, we're not still sidetracked by political infighting because we've once again failed to make the tough decisions. A comprehensive energy policy is critically important to our nation's economic recovery and our long-term energy future. Believe me, Americans are ready for it. In fact, they're demanding it. Thank you, Mr. President, and I will yield the floor. President, I'll note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
The senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I rise today. I wish to vitiate the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, I rise today in strong support of Senator Menendez's bill to eliminate subsidies to big oil companies. At a time when we have to make tough choices to address our budget deficit, when we are cutting cancer research, at a time when Minnesotans are paying $4 a gallon at the pump, and at a time when oil companies are raking in record profits, we have to stand up and say enough is enough. It's time to end the subsidies, and that's why I'm a proud co-sponsor of the bill. We've had to make a lot of tough choices, and there are plenty still to come. To avert a government shutdown, Congress enacted billions of dollars in cuts. Some were pretty hard for me to swallow, frankly. Cuts like $182 million from job training, $650 million from community development funds that help communities provide basic services like roads and sewers and affordable housing, even Pell Grants for summer school. These are cuts that will be felt by working families and people who are still struggling to find jobs and make ends meet. I voted for the spending bill that contained those cuts, not because they'd be the cuts that I'd choose to make, but because it was important to keep the government open. Addressing our budget deficits will take compromise, and it will take shared sacrifice from everyone. That includes big oil companies that are making record profits because the world price of oil is now at $100 a barrel. The bill before us would end $1.2 billion in subsidies to the five largest oil companies in fiscal year 2012 and $21 billion over the next 10 years. These companies make up 3 of the top 5 Fortune 500 companies and have had nearly $1 trillion in profit over the last decade. While high oil prices are gouging the pocketbooks of American families, these companies are on a pace for a record profit this year. In the first quarter alone, these companies collectively made about $35 billion in profits. I would like to ask my colleagues, how high do oil prices have to go? How big do the oil companies' profits have to be before we can talk about doing away with their handouts? These companies have legacy wells that pump oil at a cost of about $10 a barrel, a little less. On average, oil production costs them $15 a barrel. When exactly don't they need these subsidies anymore? They're making record profits. Now at $100 a barrel, why do they need the subsidies? If oil goes up to $102 a barrel or $110 or $150, can they give us the subsidies back then? There is absolutely no rationale for these subsidies. None at all. How much money do these companies have to make before they don't need the government's help anymore? Well, to me, it sounds like these companies don't need to be subsidized by taxpayers. President George W. Bush thought so, too. In 2005, he said, and I quote, "With $55 oil, we don't need incentives to oil and gas companies to explore. There are plenty of incentives." When testifying before Congress in 2005, one oil executive stated that removing many of these tax breaks would have no effect on his company's production activity. Today, with oil prices close to $100 a barrel, it's doubly true. Now, let me say something about House Speaker Boehner's statement on the debt limit last week. The Speaker told us in that in terms of dealing with the deficit, everything is on the table except for revenues. How can we not look at billions of dollars in handouts to some of the most profitable companies in America? You know, this is sort of like a family that can't pay its bills, and they can't pay for food and heat and electricity and medical bills and the mortgage all at the same time. So they gather around the table and say, Dad says, to make ends meet, everything's on the table for paying for this stuff, except for one of us getting an extra job or working more hours or somehow bringing in more money. We can't do that. And the son says, gee, Dad, I could do more hours at TGI Fridays. I could do that. No, son, that's off the table. No more medicine for Grandma. You go play with your Xbox some more. Revenue's off the table, especially subsidies that don't do anybody any good. That just doesn't make any sense, and it tells me that some of us aren't really serious about fixing the budget deficit. A recent report from the Joint Economic Committee concluded that, and I quote, repealing or modifying the tax incentives discussed in this report would have little or no impact on consumer energy prices in the immediate future. In 2010, 60% of the big five oil companies' profits went to stock buybacks and dividends to their shareholders, not to exploration. So even if they had fewer taxpayer subsidies and could only use, say, 59% of their record profits for buybacks and dividends this year, I'm pretty sure they could get by just fine. Now, some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle think we've got just the wrong approach and they don't want us touching big oil's government handouts. Instead, they're pushing an alternative bill that would require the government to approve or reject a drilling permit in 60 days, or it would be deemed automatically approved. This is a very dangerous idea. Just this morning, I asked Director Bromwich, who heads the agency in charge of offshore permitting, what he thought about this idea, and he said we'd all be at greater risk from such a proposal. This just shows that some of my colleagues have not learned the lessons of the BP oil spill, where a shoddy approval process and numerous industry errors led to a monumental disaster in the Gulf. This disaster brought economic hardships for thousands and cost 11 workers their lives. Let's not forget that. Offshore drilling is becoming an increasingly complex industry. To insist on a one-size-fits-all permit process ignores the increasing technical challenges that offshore drilling presents. The Republican bill is reckless and irresponsible, and I urge my colleagues to reject it. So instead of ending handouts to wildly profitable companies, my friends on the other side of the aisle are suggesting we throw caution and safety to the wind and continue to dole out these subsidies. They want to make cuts to job training programs, Pell Grants, and cancer research. They've proposed converting Medicare into a voucher program, which would end the long-standing guarantee that our seniors will have access to health care when they need it. It would end Medicare as we know it. But when we talk about touching 1 penny of big oil subsidies, they say it's off the table. I believe Americans come together in tough times and make sacrifices. We're all not going to get everything we want, and that includes big oil executives. At a time when almost 14 million Americans are unemployed, at a time when job training and other assistance programs are being cut, it's unconscionable for companies making record profits to refuse to do their part. It's unconscionable for them to refuse to give up even 1 penny of subsidies that they, frankly, don't need. Mr. President, I urge my colleagues to get serious about the deficit, to support Senator Menendez's bill, and to end these wasteful handouts. I yield the floor.
Senator from Utah.
Mr. President, today we are discussing a bill to raise taxes. That's what it is. According to the Joint Committee on Taxation, S. 940 will raise taxes by $21 billion over 10 years. And what provoked this bill to raise taxes? This time it was high gas prices. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but since Democrats took control of this chamber and since President Obama was elected, this seems to be a recurring theme. No matter the question, the answer always seems to be raise taxes. There's rarely any consideration of how this impacts the economy, how it impacts businesses and families that have to shoulder this load. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle too often look at working men and women as an endless source of cash that Washington can rely on for more governmental programs. The Democratic Party's emblem is a donkey. Sometimes I think they would be better off transitioning to a one-trick pony. The Democratic bill that we will be voting on later today is called the Closing Big Oil Tax Loopholes Act. That is certainly one message-tested name. Big oil, check. Tax loopholes, check. Again, never underestimate the left's ability to underestimate the American people. They think that just because American citizens are angry at high gas prices, that they're going to run off the cliff and support a measure just because it mentions big oil and tax loopholes. I can tell you that the people of Utah are not going to support this bill, and the American people won't either. The American people want and they need energy solutions. According to a USA Today Gallup poll, 7 out of 10 Americans say that gas prices are causing financial hardship. FedEx and UPS have increased fuel charges from 6.5% to 8.5%. By the time 2011 ends, expect restaurant prices to be 3% or 4% higher, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The issue of high gas prices is much greater than the price at the pump. The Joint Economic Committee concluded that the weak U.S. dollar has added 56 cents to every gallon of gas. Now, this is a drag on a fragile economic recovery. It inflates the prices of everything from groceries to school supplies. Just recently, we found out that 1 in 7 Americans are on food stamps. 1 in 7. One writer has dubbed this the food stamp recovery. And this weak recovery is made weaker by higher gas prices. And to deal with this, Democrats decide that rather than promote a sensible energy policy, it is better to score a few cheap political points at the expense of the politically unpopular oil companies. Americans are rightly upset about the cost of gasoline. But the solution to higher gas prices is not to raise taxes. Raising taxes on domestic energy producers might be a good thing for Hugo Chavez, but it does nothing to lift the burden of increasing gas prices that really is afflicting the American economy and working families. Under this bill, Hugo Chavez's Citgo would receive a tax incentive, while U.S. companies like Exxon and Chevron would not. Now, I was amazed to see the advocates of this legislation admit as much during a hearing on this matter last week in the Finance Committee. Mr. President, I ask that I be given an extra 5 minutes for my remarks.
Without objection.
Okay. One after one, my Democratic colleagues acknowledged the obvious. The policies that they were proposing, higher taxes on oil companies, had absolutely nothing to do with energy policy or sound tax policy, and everything to do with generating more revenue for more government spending. They acknowledged that this legislation would do nothing, I repeat, nothing, to lower the price of gas at the pump. Not a thing. They acknowledged that. I can see now why Senator Landrieu of Louisiana and Senator Begich of Alaska called this tax increase proposal a, quote, gimmick, unquote, and, quote, laughable, unquote. These are two Democrats who have been honest about what's going on here. Raising taxes will do nothing to lower the cost of fuel. And for what it's worth, this bill won't help pay down the deficit either. Nothing in this bill mandates that these new revenues would be dedicated to deficit reduction. In fact, any net revenue increase in this bill would be set aside and added to what we call savings on OMB's PAYGO scorecard, revenue that can be used to pay for future legislation. We all know that when we increase taxes, our colleagues on the other side are going to spend every dime of it. That's just been a matter of fact. So let's be clear about what's going on here. Democrats want to increase taxes to pay for more government spending. They have been refreshingly open about their intentions. One of my colleagues stated that this bill will allow us to spend money on cops and kids. Another said it will, quote, raise a significant amount of additional revenue for important projects in the United States of America, unquote. But the choice here is not lower taxes versus assistance for public safety and children. If Democrats want to pay down the deficit and have money for essential projects, there are plenty of options available besides increasing taxes. My colleague from Oklahoma, Dr. Coburn, has led a one-man crusade to identify hundreds of billions of dollars in wasteful and redundant government spending and programs. If the entire Democratic caucus spent even half the time investigating wasteful government spending as it does looking through the Internal Revenue Code for ways to increase our taxes and to malign a business like big oil, our fiscal situation would be much better. Make no mistake that this bill is a tax increase on American jobs. Under this proposal, there is a disincentive for domestic energy producers to invest in the United States, and under this proposal, American corporations will be at a competitive disadvantage with their foreign counterparts. And under this proposal, a lot of our oil companies, especially the larger ones, they're going to find it a lot better for them to work offshore, overseas, away from America, to find oil, which is they're doing anyway, without all of the tragic tax increases that come their way in our country. Sometimes we talk ephemerally about the impact of tax increases on the economy. In practice, this bill is a direct assault on American jobs, and for what? It does not do anything to bring down the cost of energy. Nothing. Nada. And it does not do anything to bring down the deficit. Not a thing. But what it does manage to do is gloss over the Obama administration's lack of energy policy. Or should I say war on energy. The ugly truth here is that this administration, abetted by congressional Democrats, has an energy policy designed to increase costs at the same time that it purports to stand shoulder to shoulder with working families that can't make ends meet because of these increased energy costs. This is the President's Energy Secretary, Stephen Chu. Quote, the current Energy Secretary, quote, somehow we have to figure out how to boost the price of gasoline to the levels of Europe, unquote. Now that's astounding to me. Some of those levels are approaching $10 a gallon. Quote, somehow we have to figure out how to boost the price of gasoline to the levels in Europe, unquote. Now the administration is talking out of both sides of its mouth. At the same time that it feigns sympathy for the families hit hardest by rising energy prices, it attempts to impose a radical environmental agenda on an unwilling middle class. At the same time that American families move to the suburbs so they can have room to grow and play, buying minivans and SUVs to accommodate their growing families, the environmental left is pushing its agenda of urban living, public transportation, and, yes, small families. For all of its righteous anger about high gas prices, it is clear from its policies where the administration stands in this fight. Now, as a senator who has worked hard to establish a strong energy foundation for America, I have watched with dismay as President Obama has done everything in his power to tear that foundation up, aggressively stop domestic energy production, and leave our nation vulnerable to our foreign competitors who are smart enough to develop their own energy resources. Since taking office, President Obama has cut new energy leases by more than 60% in this country and by more than 80% in my home state of Utah. We got a lot of oil there. It's just a matter of getting the permits to be able to drill for it or to develop it in the case of tar sands and oil shale. And Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming have an estimated 1.6 trillion barrels of recoverable oil through oil shale and tar sands. We're all aware of the President's efforts to forestall domestic energy development offshore, but less media attention has been given to his successful efforts to move the energy industry off our federal lands in the Intermountain West. The Department of Interior oversees more than 42% of the state of Utah, including much of the land where domestic energy production is pursued. One of the early moves of the Secretary of Interior, Ken Salazar, my colleague and dear friend, was his controversial withdrawal of energy leases that had already been auctioned off and paid for by energy developers after years of jumping through environmental hoops. Years. Some estimate about 7 years, maybe longer. Jumping through environmental hoops. And then just by a stroke of a pen, they withdraw 77 leases that had been paid for. And Mr. President, this is a terrible signal to our domestic energy producers, and companies are now leaving our federal lands in droves, seeking a less hostile regulatory environment on private, state, and foreign-owned lands. Get that foreign-owned lands part. They're finding it's easier. They don't have all the rigmarole and the red tape to go through to develop oil on lands overseas. A recent survey showed that in the absence of federal constraints, energy companies would be investing an additional $2.8 billion in the Rockies if they didn't have all these constraints and all of this rigmarole to go through. And Mr. President, S-940 is terrible policy in a long line of terrible policy. It is lousy energy policy, and it is lousy tax policy. Increasing taxes on American production will only stifle our economy. If Democrats want to have a conversation about tax policy and tax reform, we're ready to have that conversation, but don't single out through selective taxation one industry to take away these particular tax benefits that have been useful in helping us develop domestically our oil. But we should not be exercising our power to tax in a punitive way that singles out particular unpopular industries or just particular industries. Fortunately, I don't think that the American people are going to buy this latest installment of let's raise some taxes. And they always leave out the latter part, so we can spend more and claim that we're doing more for the people, when in fact they're spending us right into bankruptcy. Now, this bill that we are debating today will not do anything, not anything, to address high gas prices. And its Democratic supporters have acknowledged this. Nothing to help us with lower prices at the pump. It won't do a thing. But what it will do is raise revenue for the federal government to spend. Yet again, the party of big government has proposed additional taxes to fund that big government. You see, the deficit is not the Democrats' problem. No. For the Democrats, the deficit is always somebody else's problem. It is the fault of business or individual citizens for not doing their, quote, fair share, unquote, or accepting their, quote, shared responsibility, unquote, to fund this government. These are new terms that are being used now. The American people deserve better than this bill. I urge my colleagues to vote against the motion to proceed to S-940 and to support the motion to proceed to S-953 when we take it up tomorrow. Now, Mr. President, I know a little bit about oil, a little bit about developing oil, and I know one thing. We have lots of oil in our country if we'll just give the permits and allow the development of that oil. And it doesn't take any brains to realize we have all kinds of oil offshore. So for the President to go down to Brazil, give them $2 billion subsidy to develop their oil offshore, and then compliment them for having done so with rigs that probably were in the Gulf of Mexico before basically it was shut down, and then say that we'll buy your oil from you, I mean it's laughable. Absolutely laughable. And not develop our oil here in this country. We know there's all kinds of oil in Alaska. We know there's all kinds of oil in Anwar. If you were to go to Anwar, you'd be shocked at how really barren the place is. And yet, to hear the environmentalists talk, you'd think it was the most beautiful, lush part of the planet. The fact of the matter is that we can develop oil there without ruining Anwar and help our country in the process and save the taxpayers an awful lot of money and keep our country strong and make us not dependent on big oil or anybody else. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just have some good free market principles and allow our people to find our own energy in our country? A lot of people didn't realize, until it came out last week, that the United States is the third largest energy producer in the world. Now, we're the largest user by far. But there's a reason for that. We've been the most important country with the greatest economy, helping people all over the world with our tax dollars. Mr. President, I hope we vote down this bill today and vote the one up tomorrow. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from New York.
First, even though I don't agree with him, it's always a pleasure to listen to my friend from Utah give his arguments. But I will just give mine instead of talking to him. Just remind him of one thing. This bill is not intended to lower gas prices. It's intended to reduce the deficit. It clearly does that. And if my colleague cares so much about reducing that deficit, the oil companies are a good place to start. The money does not go for spending. It goes for deficit reduction. Anyway, I rise today in support of the legislation authored by my good friend from New Jersey, Senator Menendez. Senator Menendez has championed this legislation for quite some time, and I applaud the work he's done to build support for it. As you know, our leader, Senator Reid, has scheduled a vote on it in just a few minutes, and I sincerely hope the bill will pass. Nothing would be better in terms of showing bipartisanship and giving the American people hope that we can come to a fair agreement on our long-term fiscal challenges than to pass this legislation today. Now, in the last election, voters gave those of us who serve in this chamber two distinct mandates. First, and perhaps foremost, they said make the economy grow, create good-paying jobs, make sure that American dream, which says that the odds are high you'll do better 10 years from now than you're doing today, and the odds are higher still your kids will do better than you, that American dream, make sure it burns brightly. Some have wondered if it's beginning to flicker. And their mandate to us in this election was, get that candle glowing again. But second, they said do something else at the same time. They said in no uncertain terms, rein in the out-of-control federal deficit. They told us to take the bull by the horns and confront our mounting debt. And on that point, I'll agree with my colleague from Utah. Now, it's very hard to accomplish one of these two goals. To accomplish both at once is a Herculean task. There are many choices ahead, most of them rather difficult. That's why this is so hard. But one choice isn't tough at all, tough at all. I said tough at oil. Anyway, one is not tough at all, not by a mile. It is obvious at this time of fiscal restraint, when we have to make cuts that are so painful and hurt middle-class families, to continue to give big oil companies giant tax breaks makes no sense whatsoever. Getting rid of these corporate subsidies is too big oil is a no-brainer. Decades ago, when these breaks were enacted, oil was $17 a barrel. Maybe it made a modicum of sense in those days to give companies an incentive to explore and produce. But with the price of crude oil hovering at $100 a barrel and big oil reaping record profits with every barrel they drill,
It defies logic to spend billions of taxpayer dollars on these subsidies. Believe me, the free market gives the oil companies enough of an incentive to produce. When oil is $100 a barrel, they certainly don't need a financial nudge from Washington. Now, at the same time, middle-class Americans get hit with a double whammy. They're paying $70 or more to fill that gas tank. And then, in addition, when they pay their taxes, some of those hard-earned tax dollars are being used to line big oil's pockets with these subsidies. In my home state of New York, the price of gas is up 35% on average compared to this time last year. Economists estimate the typical family will pay as much as $1,000 more on gas this year as last. $1,000 a year. The average family makes about $50,000. It is so hard. They sit around the dinner table after Friday night supper, Mom and Dad, and they sit down and figure out, how are we going to pay these bills? How are we going to give our kids the life that we want to give them? And they're paying $1,000 more for gasoline, and at the same time we're subsidizing oil companies. Families across the country are still struggling to make ends meet as the economy slowly recovers. With billions of dollars worth of tax subsidies and gas prices at record high, it's no wonder the top 5 oil companies just announced jaw-dropping profits. These companies are not only among the most profitable businesses in the U.S., they're among the most profitable in the whole world. In the first quarter of this year alone, the Big Five brought in $35 billion in profit. In the past decade, they took home nearly $1 trillion. That's $1 trillion with a T. Now, there's nothing wrong with these profits in and of themselves. In America, we celebrate success. We want the private sector to thrive. But at a time when the government is looking to tighten its belt and we're grappling with painful cuts, because we have the dual goal of growing the middle class but also reducing the deficit, it boggles the mind that we continue to subsidize such a lavishly profitable industry. Moreover, as my great friend and colleague Senator McCaskill highlighted this morning in a letter to the Federal Trade Commission, those record profits smell a bit fishy. There is reason to suspect that some of the biggest oil refiners are artificially depressing supply in order to raise price to pad their bottom lines. I am proud to have co-signed Senator McCaskill's letter, as did the entire Democratic leadership team, and I look forward to the FTC's response. I'm also proud to co-sponsor the bill we're considering today, Senator Menendez's Close Big Oil Tax Loopholes Act. The legislation will put an end to taxpayer handouts to the 5 largest integrated oil companies and use the $21 billion in savings to reduce the deficit. This $21 billion is an excellent down payment on our effort to get the nation's fiscal house in order. The bill repeals a host of Byzantine tax provisions that only a lobbyist could love, such as the deduction for intangible extraction costs. Small and medium-sized oil firms are exempt. The legislation, even though some might like to go further, deals with the Big Five: ExxonMobil, Shell, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, and BP. Now, I've heard pundits from the hard right parrot Big Oil's talking point that repealing these giveaways would increase gas prices for consumers. Well, the facts beg to differ. Last week, 2 major independent studies, one from the CRS, the Congressional Research Service, and another from the Joint Economic Committee, found that ending these absurd subsidies would not impact the price of gas. And I want to compliment Senator Casey for his leadership on the second study. And what was perhaps an inadvertent moment of candor, at last week's Finance Committee hearing, ExxonMobil's CEO Rex Tillerson said, quote, "Gasoline prices are a function of crude oil prices, which are set in the marketplace by global supply and demand, not by companies such as ours," unquote. When he made that comment, Tillerson of ExxonMobil conceded that repealing taxpayer-funded subsidies for big oil won't increase prices. Prices are set, as he says, by global supply and demand. That's not to say that repealing subsidies will necessarily bring down prices. We're not making that claim. All along, we've been clear. The purpose of this bill is to make a dent in the deficit by repealing tax breaks for the 5 companies that are the least in need of help from Uncle Sam. Lowering the cost of gas and ridding our country of dependence on foreign oil requires a long-term, comprehensive approach. And in the months ahead, I expect the Democratic caucus will unveil a thorough and forward-thinking plan to do just that. In the meantime, I say to every one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, if you're serious about deficit reduction, the Menendez bill is your chance to show it now. There is no good reason not to support this sensible legislation sponsored by my friend and colleague from New Jersey. Just try to wrap your head around it. Big oil is recording record profit, gas prices are near an all-time high, and we, the American taxpayer, are subsidizing the oil industry to the tune of $4 billion a year. You need the imagination of Alice in Wonderland's Lewis Carroll to come up with a more ridiculous scenario. The bottom line, at a time of sky-high prices, it's unfathomable to continue to pad the profits of companies with taxpayer-funded subsidies. The time to repeal these giveaways is now. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Missouri.
Mr. President. I rise today in opposition of this bill, the energy tax bill that would eliminate so-called tax preferences for some oil companies. Actually, I agree with part of the bill, the part that says that several companies won't be exempted because we want to continue to encourage them what we want to continue to encourage the industry to do. The rationale that the people that are the larger suppliers don't need to be encouraged also in this doesn't make much sense to me. My good friend Senator Schumer, who's actually the chairman of the Rules Committee that I serve on, said this bill is not intended to lower gas prices. Actually, Mr. President, I'd suggest we should have a bill on the floor that is intended to lower gas prices. Gas prices are costing jobs. Jobs cost revenue. We generate a lot more tax revenue if we encourage private sector job creation than we'll solve a problem here by, I think he said, $4 billion a year. That's how much money we borrowed today. $4 billion is how much money we borrowed today, and we're looking at this as opposed to looking at the real problem that we face. This bill is brought up to make it even harder to create American energy jobs. And if there were any jobs that you almost certainly will create, it's producing more American energy. I've looked at the numbers on this. We use about as much electricity in a bad economy as we do a good economy. We use about as much gasoline in a bad economy as we do a good economy. We ought to be producing every bit of that we could with American jobs, Mr. President, but instead we've had the moratorium on drilling in the Gulf. We've had the suspension of drilling leases that were issued in 2008. Some of the first acts of this administration were to eliminate those. We now talk about new taxes on energy companies as if that's going to solve a problem. The administration recently announced that it would encourage the sale of offshore leases. And why is that? I think it's because the administration has finally decided that the economy doesn't benefit from policies that increase energy prices. This is in stark contrast to what we're talking about today. The administration has had a hard time actually issuing the permits to make leases worthwhile. There's lots of complaining about the fact that there are leases out there that aren't being used. Surprise, surprise, the leases to be used have to have a permit. And the permitting process has never been more difficult than it is right now. In fact, some of the reasons are the actions of the EPA. Shell Oil, being talked about here today in another way, recently canceled its 2011 exploration plans in the Beaufort Sea in Alaska because EPA wouldn't grant them the necessary clean air permits. Now, there was nothing different about how you were going to extract this oil in the Beaufort Sea now than there was when the drilling, the exploration permits were issued, and billions of dollars were spent to pursue the oil in the Beaufort Sea, and then suddenly the EPA says, oh, no, we're not going to give you the permit it takes to get that oil out of the sea, so American customers, American consumers won't benefit from that. Both the Senate majority as well as the administration haven't been willing to really address this energy crisis in a way that solves the problem. The tax increases won't reduce and will almost certainly increase gasoline prices. If these companies are anywhere nearly as bad as people on this floor say they are, why wouldn't they pass this along? And in fact, why wouldn't they pass it along if they were just any American company? People pay taxes. Companies don't pay taxes. And way too many of those taxes are being paid right now at the gas pump as we have tax dollars that could go for something else going not to encourage job creation, but we see just the opposite happening, Mr. President. You know, the President's policies, he said clearly as he was running for President, at least clearly at the San Francisco Chronicle, that under his energy policies, energy costs would necessarily skyrocket. Senator Hatch mentioned earlier Secretary Chu, who right before he was chosen as Secretary, so it's not anything that would have been a surprise to anybody, in December of 2008, he said what we really need is to get our gasoline prices as high as the prices in Europe. Now, those prices are now approaching $10 a barrel. I suppose this bill might have the impact of adding cost at the pump. Certainly nobody suggests it has the impact of reducing cost at the pump. But I would think that the President and the Secretary of Energy and others would begin to realize that where we need to be focused is not on making it less likely that we'll produce American energy, but making it more likely that we'll produce American energy. These incentives are to produce energy here as opposed to somewhere else. One of the incentives is a fraction of the manufacturing incentive that we try to give every manufacturer. These companies have resources around the world, as they should, and what we do is encourage them to go other places to seek those resources. And by the way, that means the jobs are in other places, not here. We need to find more American energy of all kinds. And in doing that, we don't need to figure out ways to make the current search for American energy more expensive. We need to be focused on gas and oil, natural gas and coal, nuclear and solar, wind energy and biomass. And if I left anything out, it's not because I intended to. We need to be looking everywhere we can for more American energy. This makes it more difficult. Our policy should be to find more, to use less, to look for ways to conserve the energy we have, whether it's a better insulation and windows or cars that eventually run on something that's some combination of gas and battery-powered or no gas at all and electricity. All that's fine, but most of that's not going to make any difference for quite a while. 20 years from now, most cars are still going to be running on gasoline. And 20 years from now, we're still going to need more U.S. oil and more U.S. refined gas, and we need to be less dependent, not more dependent, as we also spend money. The money we spend should be to invest in the future and figure out what comes next and what is the best thing to do for the future. We need to be focused, Mr. President, on jobs and on spending, and this bill isn't focused on the targets we ought to be focused on today, and I yield back.
Expired.
Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, I come to the floor to urge my colleagues to support the Close Big Oil Tax Loopholes Act. And to be honest, I'm really disappointed this is facing so much opposition. You know, all across the country, people are talking about ways to rein in the debt and deficit. Here in Washington, D.C., we are having a vigorous debate about the best ways to do that. I happen to think we should cut spending responsibly while continuing to make investments we need to grow the economy and create jobs for our middle-class workers. There's some difficult issues we've got to work through, but the bill we have in front of us should be an easy one. It says that the biggest oil companies in the country should stop getting subsidies from American taxpayers. It says that the $2 billion a year we send to these hugely profitable companies should be used instead to pay down the deficit. I don't understand why this seems to be so controversial. The big oil companies are already making billions of dollars in profits from families across the country who are paying sky-high prices at the pump. In fact, the 5 biggest oil companies have made nearly $1 trillion in profits in the last decade and $36 billion profit just in the first 3 months of this year alone. It's not enough that they're making money hand over fist from families who are now paying sky-high prices. They then come here before Congress and make the outlandish claim that they need to be subsidized by taxpayers as well. It doesn't make any sense, and it's got to end. Mr. President, budgets are more than just numbers on a page. They are about our priorities and our values as a nation. So I think before we cut spending in areas that will impact our middle-class families and the most vulnerable among us, we should focus right now on cutting out wasteful subsidies to huge companies that don't need it. That's what this bill does. And, Mr. President, I also want to talk about the high prices that families are paying for gas back in my home state and across the country. You know, I was recently back at home with Senator Cantwell, and we had the opportunity to meet with some local small business owners who talked about the impact of these skyrocketing prices of oil and gas and the impact on their businesses. They're hurting. These small business owners are already struggling to keep their doors open in these tough economic times. And every time prices go up at the pump, they're pushed one step closer to the edge. That's why I believe, as a country, we need to move away from our dependence on foreign oil and towards a more secure, affordable, clean energy future. It's why I've called for a crackdown on the speculation that is part of what pushes gas prices up, and why I was so disappointed that the House Republican budget slashed funding for the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. That is the very agency that's charged with protecting us consumers from the excessive speculation in the markets. Now, I think that gets to a big difference between our two parties today. Democrats are here fighting to rein in the deficit by ending the wasteful subsidies that the biggest oil companies are getting from the American taxpayer. Republicans are fighting to cripple the agency that's charged with protecting middle-class families from being ripped off and preyed upon. So these are really two different approaches to tackling the deficit. I'm going to keep fighting to make sure our middle-class families are protected, and I urge our colleagues to support this legislation that will put taxpayers and the middle class ahead of big oil. It will end the wasteful giveaways to oil companies and use that money to pay down the deficit in a responsible way. So I, too, want to thank Senator Menendez and McCaskill and Tester and Brown for their great work on this issue, and I hope we can finally put this to rest and, Mr. President, save taxpayers $21 billion over the next 10 years. Thank you, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President. Senator from New Jersey.
President, how much time is left?
2 minutes and 10 seconds.
Thank you. Mr. President, the American people understand this bill. They understand that if working families must sacrifice to help lower the deficit, then so should the most wealthy and powerful industry in the country. And if big oil wants to lower gasoline prices, they would put a lot less money in their stock buybacks or their multi-million-dollar CEO salaries and a lot more in producing oil. Or they could just use some of their enormous profits to lower prices. But I guess in that world, greed is good. What the American people understand about this bill, it's clear for them what it does, but many on the other side of the aisle simply do not, and because this is such a simple, common-sense idea, they've made up arguments just to get through this debate. One of my colleagues said it would raise the deficit. Only in Washington could you actually have that comment be made when the Joint Tax Committee has clearly made it known that this would lower the deficit by $21 billion. Lower the deficit by $21 billion, not raise it. Another argument I've heard is that this bill will somehow raise gas prices. That argument is absurd. with the big five oil companies poised to make $144 billion in profits this year alone, it means that big oil would simply have to settle for $142 billion in profits this year to pay their fair share of dealing with the deficit, and they wouldn't have to raise gas prices 1 cent. And that's what the Congressional Research Service independently decided, as well as the Joint Tax Committee. Now, I've also heard the argument that big oil actually pays more taxes than other companies. That's not true for multiple reasons. ExxonMobil's effective tax rate is actually lower than the average American family's rate. They pay far higher taxes abroad in other countries than they do here, so there's no competitive disadvantage, and we have the lowest royalty rates in the world. So, Mr. President, we have rarely seen in this body a more stark contrast and a more obvious choice. American families are sitting around the kitchen table trying to figure out how to make ends meet within the constraints of their own family budgets. We're simply asking big oil, making $144 billion, to do their fair share, and that's what this vote is all about.
The Senator's time has expired. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The question is on the motion to proceed. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander, Ms. Ayotte, Mr. Barrasso. Aye. Yes, sir. Mr. Baucus. I did. I got you. Mr. Begich. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bingaman. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Boxer. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts. Mr. Brown of Ohio. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Cochran. Ms. Collins. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Coons. Mr. Corker. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Dement. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Enzi. Mrs. Feinstein. Mr. Franken. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mrs. Hagan. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Heller. Mr. Hoeven. Mrs. Hutchison. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Mr. Kerry. Mr. Kirk. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Cole. Mr. Kyle. Ms. Landrieu. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Lee. Mr. Levin. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Manchin. Mr. McCain. Mrs. McCaskill. Mr. McConnell. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Merkley. Ms. Mikulski. Mr. Moran. Ms. Murkowski. Mrs. Murray. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska. Mr. Nelson of Florida. Mr. Paul. Mr. Portman. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Reid of Rhode Island. Mr. Reid of Nevada. Mr. Risch. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Rockefeller. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Sessions. Mrs. Shaheen. Mr. Shelby. Ms. Snow. Ms. Stabenow. Mr. Tester. Mr. Thune. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Udall of Colorado. Mr. Udall of New Mexico. Mr. Vitter. Mr. Warner. Mr. Webb. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative: Bingaman, Cardin, Conrad, Durbin, Cole, Leahy, Menendez, Murray, Tester, and Webb. Senators voting in the negative: Alexander, Ayotte, Barrasso, Blunt, Burr, Coates, Corker, Cornyn, Crapo, Enzi, Grassley, Inhofe, Isaacson, Johans, McConnell, Paul, Risch, Roberts, and Vitter. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, no. Mr. Rockefeller. Mr. Rockefeller, aye. Mr. Heller. Mr. Heller, no. Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham, no. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Inouye, aye. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, no. Mr. Casey. Mr. Casey, aye. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner, aye. Mr. Manchin. Mr. Manchin, aye. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Harkin, aye. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blumenthal, aye. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, no. Ms. Landrieu. Ms. Landrieu, no. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, aye. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Pryor, aye. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Lugar, no. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Wyden, aye. Mr. Franken. Mr. Franken, aye. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Coburn, no. Mrs. Hutchison. Mrs. Hutchison, no. Ms. Collins. Ms. Collins, aye. Ms. Snow. Ms. Snow, aye. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Whitehouse, aye. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Sanders, aye. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Schumer, aye.